Après 8 ans, Justin Trudeau n'en vaut pas le coup et il n'en vaut pas
this is just
la
today.
corruption.
Pierre does
Après 8 ans de doubler le coût de logement, Justin
announcement
Trudeau
on this
gaspille.
ArriveCan, so we're going to skip ahead as much as I can to
Trudeau
the
gaspille
English.
% des
It's
contracteurs
definitely a busy day for the Conservatives today.
pour chaque personne, chaque jour.
See? Oh, well, yeah, I guess.
Pour 2 semaines,
He goes on
qu'il n'avait pas accès aux
for at
données
least 10 minutes. So this is like
worth the cost.
so here we go. We're going to start it up.
Et
This is the
stopper
beginning
le
of it.
Ce sont des priorités de gros bon sens.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for watching and enjoy the.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
After 8 years, Justin Trudeau is not worth the cost and not worth the corruption. After 8 years, Justin Trudeau has doubled housing costs. He's doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, doubled the needed down payment for the average home. After 8 years of Trudeau, you now have to save 25 years for a down payment on a home in Toronto, when you used to be able to pay off an entire mortgage in that time. After 8 years, young women wonder if they'll ever be able to have kids because they're stuck in their parents' basements until their early 40s, when under the previous government, the average age of buying a home was 29. After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, criminal defense lawyers tell us that their convict clients are asking to stay in jail so they don't have to go out and find a place to rent, because prison is better than Justin Trudeau's housing market. After 8 years of Trudeau, a record-smashing 2 million people line up at food banks every single month in scenes that are reminiscent of the Great Depression. After 8 years of Trudeau, there are now 30 homeless encampments in Halifax alone, some scenes that were unimaginable only 8 years ago. After 8 years of Trudeau, violent crime has exploded by 40% at least, and growing quickly. We see a record-smashing increase in extortions and other serious crimes. And after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, while you can't pay your bills, where you can't afford a home, he's taken $60 million of your tax dollars and given it to a corrupt app, ArriveCan, that doesn't work, that we didn't need, and that went 750 times over budget. Think of that the next time you go to the grocery store and you look at the cost of the food and that bill is too high for you to pay. Think of it the next time you look at his carbon tax, which he's quadrupling, on your heating bill, and you wonder if you'll be able to keep the heat on for the rest of the winter. He took $60 million of your dollars and put it into this ArriveCan. Think of that when you see homeless people who can't afford a place to live, that Justin Trudeau took their money for this ArriveCan app. Common sense Conservatives told him not to do ArriveCan, but he went ahead anyway. What were the results of that decision? Well, we now know the results. ArriveCan costs at least $60 million, 750 times over budget. $12 million could be unrelated to ArriveCan altogether, even though it was paid out for that purpose. Money given to GC Strategies, we were told it was $9 million, then it became $13 million, and now they say it was $19 million. 18% of the invoices were submitted by contractors who lacked information to determine if expenses were related to ArriveCan. GC strategists were involved in writing the requirements for the very contract that they would win and profit from. Initial documentation leading to GC Strategies' first $2.3 million contract is missing. Average per diem costs, this is per person per day, were $1,900, far higher than the normal and still exorbitant $675 per person per day the Trudeau government normally throws out the window. 10,000 travelers were wrongly quarantined by Trudeau's ArriveCan app. Single mothers who couldn't go to work because they got notice that they had to be quarantined. They weren't able to pay for their children's food because their wage was canceled by an app that locked them in their home, unable to work, and wrongly and unjustifiably so. No evidence to show CBSA employees complied with the Code of Conduct. In fact, they were invited to whiskey tasting and other luxurious treats from the very contractors that they were paying your money to. And page 18, some subcontractors did not have the property security clearances, so Trudeau put your private information at risk. While Trudeau says he doesn't have enough money to scan those shipping containers that are taking your car that's been stolen and sending it off to the rest of the world, the very same department that is responsible for our borders and our ports took $60 million or more for the Arrive scam. More proof that after 8 years, Trudeau is not worth the cost, he's not worth the crime, he's not worth the corruption. That's why we need a common-sense Conservative government that will slash the waste and end the corruption, that will respect your tax dollars. We will cap spending and cut waste to balance the budget and bring down inflation and interest rates. We will axe the carbon tax to lower your food, gas, and heating bills. We will lower income tax so hard work pays off again. We'll clear away the bureaucracy and taxes to build more homes. We'll bring jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders. And we will secure our borders, including our ports, to keep the drug dealers and smugglers from bringing drugs in and car thieves from taking your vehicles out. We will restore the common sense of the common people, united for our common home, with a clear agenda to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime.
I like how he's got a mantra. That's what I like to call a mantra.
Why did your party want to grant over $100 million in regulatory relief to the mainstream media?
We don't want to give any tax dollars to the mainstream media. Our belief is that the mainstream media and all...
Decision, then? Your party's decision to grant regulatory relief?
So I'll answer your question. The media that is bought and paid for, where are you from, by the way? Which outlet are you in? Which outlet? Which outlet?
Canadian Press.
Ah, okay, Canadian Press. So you're talking about tax dollars for media. Isn't CBC your biggest? Isn't I can answer.
I asked regulatory.
Yeah, and you want to answer?
Why does your party want to grant $100 million in regulatory relief to the mainstream media?
When would you like me to respond? Okay, good. Okay, great. So, of course, you are a tax-funded media outlet and spreading Justin Trudeau's message.
I got to put that back.
So
I'm not against the reporters as much as the Conservatives, but
I am answering the question.
Okay, when do you want me to answer? I got to put that back. I'm sorry.
Where are you from, by the way? Which outlet are you in?
It's just good for viewing, you know. Nothing against the reporters.
Okay, Canadian Press. So you're talking about tax dollars for media. Isn't CBC your biggest? Isn't I can answer.
I asked regulatory.
Yeah, and you want to answer?
Why does your party want to grant $100 million in regulatory relief to the mainstream media?
When would you like me to respond? Okay, good. Okay, great. So, of course, you are a tax-funded media outlet and spreading Justin Trudeau's message.
Why did you
and so you're interrupting me again. You're interrupting me again. I am answering the question.
Do you regret granting $100 million in regulatory relief to the mainstream media?
Your question is false. So if you can allow me to correct your falsehoods, then we can answer the question directly. So, false. Canadian Conservatives do not believe in giving tax dollars to media outlets. That's Justin Trudeau. That's Justin Trudeau. That's Justin Trudeau. Okay, if you don't want me to answer the question, I'll move on to someone else. You're a tax-funded mouthpiece to the PMO. That's the reality. So,
question answered. You committed.
I'm trying to, but you're heckling. Are you going to let me answer the question, or are you just going to heckle on behalf of Justin Trudeau? Which is it?
I would love the answer.
Great. So our party does not support tax dollars for media outlets, because that's when we end up with biased media like you, who come here and articulate the PMO talking points rather than delivering real news to the Canadian people. Justin Trudeau gave Bell Media and other media tax dollars supposedly to protect media jobs. And then what happened? They all got laid off. So that the supposed justification for giving Bell all this money was that it was going to save media jobs. Well, they all got fired. So I guess that wasn't the real reason for giving tax dollars to the media. The real reason was for him to buy support from the media, which is what it actually did. So we believe that media should be driven by readership, viewership, and listenership, and that's what allows it to represent the Canadian people rather than taking marching orders from the PMO.
Monsieur Poilievre, la vérificatrice générale ne mentionne nulle part dans son rapport qu'il y a eu de la corruption. Sur quelle preuve est-ce que vous vous basez pour dire qu'il y a eu corruption avec ArriveCan? Elle n'utilise pas le mot corruption, vous l'utilisez. Sur quelle preuve est-ce que vous vous basez?
Je vais vous donner les exemples.
Non, mais vous les avez déjà lus, mais ça, la vérificatrice générale ne va pas jusqu'à dire que c'est de la corruption.
Parce que moi, je crois que c'est la corruption. Pourquoi? Parce que, premièrement, on a dit que c'était 40 000 qu'on allait coûter. Excuse. Ça coûtait 60 millions de dollars, 750 fois plus élevé. 75% des contracteurs n'ont pas, il n'y a aucune preuve qu'ils ont fait du travail. Quand on est payé l'argent pour rien, est-ce que c'est la corruption?
Mais pourquoi est-ce que s'il y a de la corruption, pourquoi la vérificatrice générale ne l'a pas mentionné?
Demande à elle.
Sir, do you believe that the civil service should be able to do more of its own IT work? And if that's the case, when you're Prime Minister, how will you make that happen given that you're looking at cuts?
The answer is yes, and we'll make it happen because we're going to cut back on the outside consultants. So these two things are not in opposition. They are in concurrence. We want to cut back on outside consultants because public servants do the work more accountably and they do it more affordably. We know that because public servants don't cost $1,090 a day. They cost significantly less than that. So we're going to save money by reversing Trudeau's doubling of outside consulting fees. Thank you.
The Auditor General found that the civil service didn't have the skills to do this kind of work. So wouldn't you need to train them, and wouldn't that cost money,
Like
sir?
Phoenix. That didn't go so well.
But there were contractors involved in Phoenix as well.
Sir, I'd like to understand what you will do when you are Prime Minister, sir. The Auditor General found that the civil service didn't have these skills.
Why is it the public service doesn't have these skills? It's insane. We've increased the size of the public service by 50% under Justin Trudeau. And none of those 100,000 extra people have the skills to design an app that a couple of IT workers separately and as a joke designed in a single weekend. How is it possible that a couple of guys got a stack of pizza boxes and a case of beer and as a joke redesigned the ArriveCan app from scratch in a weekend, and yet the 100,000 public servants Trudeau hired cannot do the very same thing? That points to the fact that he is an incompetent Prime Minister who is wasting our money. He's not worth the cost.
Last question. The Auditor General on the issue of the police investigation. She says in the report that the parts that are already under internal investigation, either by the CBSA or the RCMP, she didn't want to interfere in that, so she didn't go down that road. Are you concerned that that's missing from today's report?
I am, yes, very much so. And that might be one of the reasons why the Auditor General didn't use the same language as I did, is because certain parts of the scandal are not covered in this audit. We need the police to get to the bottom of it. I know that there are certain parts of this that are already under police investigation, and we want the truth to come out, and we want the police's findings to be complete and public so that Canadians know about all the corruption and mismanagement in the Trudeau government.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, so before question period pops up, we have whatever. I like to say we for some reason. I guess because it's normal for media to say it like that. But it's just me, myself, and I. Okay, so the Auditor General was in. Check out the videos. We got some videos up with some clips. Another one's coming up very shortly. And here's this nice symbol. Oh, not that one. This is my favorite, and that is the Native American symbol of the sun god. There's all kinds of way more into Native knowledge than I ever thought. My ignorance did not create bliss. It's amazing. I got to give it that. Oh, my nephew is signed up. I wish he didn't. Okay, so I'm going to put up this one thing, and just needed to put that video. So yeah, that's about that. So the ArriveCan. I was checking. Okay. Yes, so the ArriveCan here, I'm going to read out some of the facts. There's the picture. Thanks for. Okay, so I'm going to put this up in a second. So what happened on the report? Some key facts and findings. On the April 2020, the Canadian Border Service Agency launched the digital application ArriveCan to collect contact and health information from travelers and assist with quarantine measures. Quarantine, I can't believe that. Wow, eh? 18% of invoices submitted by contractors that we tested. This is the Auditor General's report, okay? This is her summary, or their summary. So 18% they tested did not provide enough information to determine whether expenses related to the ArriveCan or the IT project, another IT project. This made it impossible to accurately attribute costs to projects. Okay, point 3. The Canadian Border Services Agency, okay, from now on it's CBSA, added the Digital Customs and Immigration Declaration into the ArriveCan application at a cost of about $6.2 million to replace the existing paper-based system, which was going to be expensive. And in one of the videos, and we'll see this coming up, a Liberal MP brought it up. It would have cost about $1 million or so to do a paper system, to update it. The paper system, I believe. That's what was said in the committee. The new digital declaration form retained in use after requirements to collect travelers' contact and health information stopped on October 2022. Okay, point 4. We estimated that the average per diem cost for the ArriveCan external resources was $1,000 and $1,090, whereas the average daily cost for equivalent IT positions in the Government of Canada was $675. The Canadian Border Services, CBSA, continued to rely on external resources, increasing the cost of the application. Okay, so they were like, less than double, about 40% more. Between April 2020 and October 2022, the CBSA, Canadian Border Service Agency, released 117 versions of ArriveCan with often little to no documentation of testing. And one update in June 2022, around 10,000 travelers were wrongly instructed to quarantine. Oh, it's like self-quarantine. Okay, that's right. It was all self-quarantine. I didn't travel during this time, so excuse my ignorance. That's it. Okay, 5. April 2020. This is also in the description if you don't want to listen to my yammerings. Between April 2020. Oh no, I did that one. There is no formal agreement between the Public Health Agency of Canada and the CBSA from April 22 to July 2021 to clarify roles and responsibilities. That is just amazingly lack of, like, I'm a Mickey Mouse organization. I even assign myself duties. In the absence of a designated lead, good project management practices, such as developing project objectives and goals, budgets and cost estimates, and risk management activities were not carried out. Okay, last point that she has. We found no evidence to show that some Canadian Border Service Agency, CBSA, employees complied to the agency's code of conduct by disclosing that they have been invited to dinners and whiskey tastings and other activities by contractors. The whiskey tasting is the best because it's whiskey tasting, like, they're doing a lot of tasting. This tastes like booze. This one tastes like booze. The agency launched an investigation, and we did not undertake a further audit work around ethics and the code of conduct to avoid duplicating or compromising this process. The Auditor General Hogan also expressed exasperation that she wasn't informed that there was an RCMP investigation while she was, lack of a better term, doing her job and snooping around, right? Nosing around, doing her job in a good way. And she found out later, there's an RCMP investigation into this, and like anybody, if you're looking into something and you're not a cop, you're just a regular, or you just and you hear that, well, you do what everyone else does. You put your hands in the air, you show your palms, and you take one step back. That's basically what she did. I like this Auditor General. She isn't very hyperbolic. She could be more, but then she would compromise her position. That would just help my channel or my excitement of watching. So let's see. That's the key images. All right. Now I'm going to just put this up for a sec. No. Image. All right. So we're going to put on the committee. Just got to do one thing here. Thank you once again for watching. And in about 40 minutes-ish, we will go direct to...
with the statement.
So
for basic management and contracting practices throughout ArriveCan's development and implementation. Si les organisations government organizations needed to be flexible and fast in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, but they still needed to document their decisions and demonstrate the prudent use of public funds. In this audit, we found disappointing failures and omissions everywhere we looked. Most concerning was that the Canada Board of Services Agency did not have complete and accurate financial records. Because of this, we were unable to calculate the exact cost of the ArriveCan application. By piecing together information available, we estimated that ArriveCan cost approximately $59.5 million. There was confusion right from the beginning. From April 2020 to July 2021, we found that the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Canada Board of Services Agency did not work together to establish each agency's responsibilities for ArriveCan. In this accountability void, neither organization developed and implemented good project management practices, such as developing objectives and goals, and budgets and cost estimates. In our examination of contracting practices, we saw little documentation to support how and why the Canada Board of Services Agency initially awarded GC Strategies the ArriveCan contract through a non-competitive process. Only one potential contractor submitted a proposal, and that proposal did not come from GC Strategies. We found evidence that GC Strategies was involved in the development of requirements that were used when the agency later moved to a competitive process to award a $25 million contract for work on the ArriveCan app. The requirements were very specific and narrow. This gave GC Strategies an advantage that other potential bidders did not have. We also found that the Canada Border Services Agency's overall management of contracts was very poor. Essential information was missing from awarded contracts, such as clear deliverables and the qualifications required of workers. When we looked at invoices approved by the agency, details about the work performed and who did the work were often missing. This greatly contributed to our conclusion that the best value for money was not achieved.
Finally, we found no evidence that Canada Board of Services Agency employees disclosed invitations to private functions that they received from contractors, as is required by the agency's Code of Values and Ethics. This created a significant risk or perception of a conflict of interest
or bias around procurement decisions. Public servants must always be transparent and accountable to Canadians for their use of public funds. An emergency does not mean that all the rules go out the window and that departments and agencies are no longer required to document their decisions and keep complete and accurate records. As I said earlier, I believe that this audit of ArriveCan shows a glaring disregard for basic management practices. As a result, many questions that parliamentarians and Canadians are asking cannot be answered. The lack of information to support ArriveCan spending and decisions has compromised accountability. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening statement. We would be very pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you. And thank you to you once again.
Round of question. Each member will have 6 minutes, beginning with the official opposition. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 6, and I understand you wish to split your time. Over to you.
Auditor, thank you very much for being here today. Did Canadian taxpayers get value for money from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government on the $60 million ArriveCan app?
So we concluded that the public service did not ensure that Canada received best value for money. I would tell you that we paid too much for this application.
You described it as the Trudeau government having, quote, glaring disregard for management practices, end quote, and poor record keeping, a lack of basic due diligence, and that you were, quote, unable to determine the precise cost of the ArriveCan app, end quote. So $60 million is an estimate. Is that correct?
Yes, we estimated that it cost around $59.5 million. There could be amounts there that should not be linked to ArriveCan, but there also could be amounts that are linked to ArriveCan that were not flagged in the books and linked to that project.
So it's reasonable to say that it could be more than $60 million.
It's reasonable to say that we've put together the best estimate, but it took a lot of effort. We had to go through many journal entries all the way back down to task authorizations to see whether or not items were linked to ArriveCan. Professional judgment was needed, yes.
Right, and just to quote the key facts from your report, it says, quote, this made it impossible to accurately attribute costs to projects, end quote, with respect to the poor record keeping. You've been investigating billions of dollars in government spending over your tenure as Auditor General. Would you say that the Trudeau government's ArriveCan is the worst that you've seen?
So I looked at a lot of contracting that happened during the pandemic when the public service was asked to act quickly and serve the public. This would probably be the first example that I've seen where there is such a glaring disregard for some of the most basic and fundamental policies and rules and controls.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Berchtold, please.
Mr. Berchtold, vous avez 30 minutes.
3 minutes, 3 seconds, Mr. Berchtold. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hogan, for your report. I want to say first that I'm shocked and scandalized by the way the government of Prime Minister Trudeau has acted, and I quote your press community. You talk about glaring disregard for management practices with regard to the management of ArriveCan. Now, there was a motion moved by the Conservatives, and we would not be here today and to actually examine the practices of government, and the Liberal members of Parliament voted against the inquiry. And here today we're seeing troubling outcomes. Now, Canadians, did they get value for money with ArriveCan? Our understanding is that the value received
is not in keeping with funds spent. The government paid too much for the application, and there are a number of reasons to support this observation. The ongoing dependence on external contractors, the lack of justification as to why they chose a given contractor, and why always call upon resources with 10 years of experience or more. Now, the documentation did not show why it was the right decision, and even with, the lack of competition in the processes, we believe that Canadians did not get value for money. Ms. Hogan, you said that concerning the application, you cannot calculate the exact cost because of record keeping. Is it possible that the ArriveCan app cost even more than what you've determined? It's possible that it might have cost less because the bookkeeping I looked at is the worst I've seen in years. The lack of information to support the work done. If it is actually tied in with ArriveCan, I've been left perplexed. And I cannot give you a more exact figure. And I don't know why it's come to that. The record keeping should have existed, and public service in the past has done a lot better. Ms. Hogan, in all of your experience with all of the files you've worked on with your team, would you have ever imagined having found in Canada's public service under this government as bad an example of this glaring lack of accountability? It is surprising to see the extent to which the most basic elementary policies were not followed when it came to managing ArriveCan. Might you ever have thought that you'd not be able to identify who had awarded a contract of, more than $19 million to an external firm? Well, the decision who took the decision, or the evidence to show who took that decision, is lacking. But we have found a description of the work, the requirements to award the contract, and that comes from a ministerial directive. When a public servant exercises their delegated authorities by signing the request, it's accompanied by responsibilities. And I would have expected that if the public servant was uncomfortable, did not want to sign the document, they would have asked their superior or put in the file the reasons for this. But the record keeping is very slim, and important and elementary decisions were not well documented for the
no documentation
file. Thank you, Mr. Berthaud.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a second to read partial her report. I did the bullet points last time. Now here's at a glance. Overall, the Canadian Border Service Agency, CBSA, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and Public Services of Procurement Canada repeatedly failed to follow good management practices in the contracting, development, and implementation of the ArriveCan application. As a result of the many gaps and weaknesses we found, this is the Auditor General, in the project's design, oversight, and accountability, it did not deliver the best value for taxpayer dollars spent. That's basically the enduring benefit of the ArriveCan application is that it remains available for customs and immigration declarations. As of October 2022, ArriveCan is no longer used to collect travelers' contact and health information. So, let's open up the oil. Let's pay for these apps. The Canadian Border Services Agency documentation, financial records, and controls were so poor that we were unable to determine the precise cost of the ArriveCan application. They couldn't determine the cost. She said $62 million, but they scoured everything. She said they found notes. What does she mean? Like sticky notes? Give $25 million. Okay, and here's a side note. There was this guy in Hong Kong, a business in Hong Kong, got AI scammed in a corporate in a meeting. And he gave over $25 million. It was all AI. They weren't actually his CEO, his boss, and all this stuff. It was all fake. And he handed over $25 million. The Canadian... okay, so I'm going to repeat again. The Canadian Border Services Agency's documentation, financial records, and controls were so poor that we were unable to determine the precise cost of the ArriveCan application. Using the information that was available, we estimated the cost at approximately $59.5 million. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the agency determined that it did not have the resources needed to develop the application and that it would therefore rely on external resources. The agency's decision to work with external resources as well as continued reliance on them through the project increased the costs of the ArriveCan. All right, 2 more paragraphs. The Canadian Border Services Agency disregard for policies, controls, and transparency in the contracting process, restricted opportunities for competition, and undermined value for money. We found that the agency had little documentation to support how and why GC Strategies was awarded the initial ArriveCan through contract through a non-competitive process. We also found that GC Strategies was subsequently involved in the development of the requirements that the agency ultimately included in the request for the proposal for its competitive contract. So it was involved in the developing the requirements. Although departments and agencies were encouraged to be flexible given the urgent need of response to the pandemic, right? And this is what I think would happen here. You know, everyone was like, I don't give a the world is going on fire. You know, come on. You know, you don't put these people in war. You know, they're useless in war. The need to document this. See, I'm exactly the opposite. I'm useless in nice conditions. The need to document decisions and demonstrate transparency and prudent use of public funds remained. We also found deficiencies in how the CBSA managed the contracts, again raising concerns about value for money. Chin chin. Given the number and value of competitive and non-competitive sorry, it froze on me here. Value of non-competitive contracts used to carry out this project. We are concerned that essential information such as clear deliverables and required qualifications was missing. We found that details about the work performed were often missing on invoices and supporting timesheets submitted by contractors that the agency approved. So they're like approved, Post-it note, approved. Post-it note, approved. 2.2 million. You know, I'm exaggerating, but I imagine there was a little bit of that going on. Let's carry on with the... Okay, so the Liberals were up, and not they, you know, nothing against them today, but
there are mechanisms
we're limited
in
time.
The government to make sure that it's clear that if it's a contract or a task authorization, what work you expect to happen. So that when the invoice comes in, you can validate that the government received the services that they contracted out and paid at the right rate. A lot of that information here was missing. So while you might switch a resource or ask them to do something else, it should be documented. Those are just basic expectations to demonstrate due diligence and prudent use of public funds.
In your report and in your discussion with CBSA, there's some discrepancy in terms of the cost of overall cost of ArriveCan, because you can't reconcile what has taken place here. There's about 16 million or so that they've identified as being other applications. Did you see value for money in those contracts?
So the agency raised concerns around about $12 million that was included in the $59 million. Because they felt at times of a general nature, or it wasn't clear that it related to ArriveCan. And I think that's exactly our main finding, is that their records should be better to demonstrate that. When we looked more specifically at that $12 million, we felt that about half of it was clearly linked to the ArriveCan application, and in fact half of it had been provided to another parliamentary committee previously as expenses linked to ArriveCan. This just speaks to why it's important to document as you go and make sure that
these are the most basic
proof things. And I think having that worked in, that we're done.
I think I probably have just
Tell you what, you give me this time, I'll give it back to you if you're a little longer next time. Thank you. Turning to our next round, Mr. General.
Have certain skills that are needed or aren't needed every day.
Okay,
and
here's
how
the
do you
NDP.
transition some of that knowledge from
the NDP questions, and then we have
to the public service.
Okay, so here's the NDP MP on questions about this ArriveCan, and then we have the Conservatives coming up. I think it's Kelly Block and Genuous and thing.
So that going forward, you can have options that are available that might be less costly and then result in better value for money.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hogan. In terms of, I think there's two aspects that I want to focus on in my rounds to continue. One is on the actual existence of the shadow public service, this network of contractors that seem to have preferential access to the CBSA in this instance. You have noted in your report that there was many instances that there were individuals who received invitations or gifts to events that would have otherwise enabled contact with these contractors. That lack of evidence that is documented suggests that they were influenced by these gifts or these events. Would you say that that's an immense concern that you also have?
I think it was clear here that there was existing relationships between the public service and some of the vendors, and that the invitations that were received to attend events are likely more common in the private sector than they are in the public sector, but they exist. And that's why there's a code of conduct. And the agency's code of conduct required that individuals notify their supervisor that they received these invitations. And that's done in order to eliminate real or perceived conflicts of interest and to remove any bias that may have existed in contracting. We saw no evidence that individuals who had been invited had followed the code of conduct and reported to their supervisors. Perhaps it happened, but there was nothing documented. And so it really raises the risk that there is a conflict of interest or bias.
Was there whiskey tasting going on in the office with some ball scratching? Because that's just not good code of conduct.
In some of the procurement decisions that were done.
I think I probably have just.
You give me this time, I'll give it back to you if you're a little longer next time. Thank you. Turning to our next round, Mr. Genuous, I understand you're splitting your 5-minute slot. The floor is yours.
Madam Auditor General, thank you. I am going to go quickly. Your report found that the average daily pay rate for each contractor and consultant who worked on ArriveCan was $1,100 per day. That seems incredible to me. How do these costs compare to what would normally be paid for people working on this kind of project?
So that's a difficult question to answer when we really just focused in on the resources that we're working on ArriveCan, and that's where the average comes from. As I answered to a previous question, I would have expected that the dependency on those external resources would have reduced over time, but I also would have expected that the requirement to always ask for resources with 10 years of experience or more would have been better documented or justified. A mix is likely a better combination of lesser experience and 10 years or more, and that would have resulted in better value for money for taxpayers.
Thank you. And your report identifies that the $1,100 per day is substantially more than people working inside the public service would receive. Your report reveals shocking details about cozy relationships between the Trudeau government and the contractors at GC Strategies who got the ArriveCan contract. This company was actually involved in the development of the rules and requirements for making proposals. This seems to me akin to having the coach of one of the teams making the rules and directing the referee, an effective rigging of the process. Now, Liberals didn't want this audit to happen at all, which is why they voted against it in the House of Commons. You found that rules were broken when contracting vendors offered gifts, hospitality, and invitations that were not properly reported. So I'd like to ask, how many public servants receive these kinds of gifts, hospitality, and invitations from contractors that were not properly documented or reported?
So I don't have exact figures at my hands, and I probably don't have an exhaustive list, but we did see that it was more than one contractor who invited individuals in the branch that developed ArriveCan, but we saw no documentation that any of those invitations that we saw through emails had been reported to supervisors, and that's what's concerning. Is that would have helped the supervisor put in place measures to make sure that there wasn't apparent or real conflicts of interest.
So roughly how many individuals, and also could you provide the committee with a list of names of those who offered and those who received these kinds of invitations?
So we can go back through our file and look at what we have to provide you, but it would be really just linked to ArriveCan, and the department might be able to, the agency might be able to provide you a more comprehensive list if you want to ask them when they're here.
Thank you. If I understood right, though, you are able to go through and provide what you have to the committee on that?
Will have, but it isn't in any way comprehensive. We'll see what we can provide you.
And just a final comment, I think the reason this is important is because it's clear from what we're hearing from the government that they are trying to use an internal investigation to pin this whole affair on one or two individuals. But the investigator who is supposed to be undertaking their internal investigation is actually subject to the existing chain of command. So that process is just as rigged, just as susceptible to influence as the original bid was. And with that, I'll end my time.
Thank you. Ms. Kuzi, you have the floor now for 2 minutes.
So we've established that this goes far beyond the existing criminal investigation, that there were existing relationships that you indicated, Auditor General, that could have provided bias or leaning towards serious contractors. My colleagues have established that there was no value for money for Canadians here. An app that was supposed to cost $80,000 ending up costing $60 million. We see $60 million spent, $12.2 million, potentially unrelated even to this application, 18% of invoices by contractors who did not provide supporting documentation, and even work being completed without security clearances. Regarding the contracting, when we look at all this, when we look at all of these discrepancies, this incompetence, possible malfeasance, who is fundamentally responsible for the contracting, Auditor General? Who has the final say on overseeing contracting for the ArriveCan app?
So I would back it up to say fundamentally that the deputy head, in this case the president of Canada Border Services Agency, is responsible for all decisions that are made within the department. That being said, there are delegations of authority that go to other layers of the public service. And I draw a difference between individuals who do the work and then individuals who oversee and make decisions. And those individuals are usually in management, director, DG, assistant deputy minister level. And they set the tone for making sure that policies and basic requirements are followed. And we just found a glaring disregard for that here. We could not find documented evidence as to who made the ultimate decision to choose a vendor or why that vendor was chosen, but we did see a contract requisition that was signed by an executive director in the department. In my view, a public servant who exercises their delegation of authority, signing on something, comes with a responsibility and accountability for that decision being made. And if they feel that they've been pressured or didn't want to make the decision, that they should have informed their supervisor or they should have documented, there are recourses that public servants can take if they feel that they shouldn't be exercising the delegation of authority that's granted to them.
And thank you very much. That is your time. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Auditor General, for this for the important work that you've done. Now, you've suggested that the value for money was not achieved. Did you also investigate the cost of using paper processing versus the cost of using ArriveCan over time? I know that on the CBSA website, it indicates that paper processing would have been almost $95 million versus the cost of the ArriveCan app. Looking for your thoughts on that.
So we did conclude that the best value for money was not achieved here. There was some value, and I'll point back to our report in 2021. We issued 2 reports looking at border measures. The second actually noted that because of ArriveCan, the government was able to improve the quality of information collected from travelers, and they were able to follow up with travelers in a more timely way. Now, there were still many travelers that weren't followed up, but the app sped up the process, the paper process that was originally there. I would add that there is also an enduring value to this application, as now CBSA has sort of springboarded off what was done here to automate the border, something they had been working on before the pandemic, and they use this as a sort of a springboard to go there. So there is some sort of enduring value left post the use during the pandemic. We did look at what it might cost for a piece of paper versus automation, and it really isn't a linear calculation. I think we would have probably landed somewhere around $3 or so for a piece of paper. But again, I think it's more about the quality of the information and the timing, right? The paper was making its way to the Public Health Agency 28 days after an individual had crossed the border. Really hard to follow up on a 14-day quarantine. So, the value, I don't think should be quantified, but should be in the fact that there was a more timely follow-up with travelers during the height of the pandemic.
In your report, when you identify that this is the overlooking of it is based on efficiency, about the value and effectiveness of the app itself, would you say that between the paper-based and the automotive, that there was value there?
Well, as I said, there was some value. I would tell you that the government was effective at delivering on this app. It was done very quickly, quicker than you would see most things. Was it efficient and provide good value for money? That's where I would tell you no. The government has paid too much for this app. The public service should do better going forward on projects like this.
Now, you had also I outlined that you were very concerned that one of your main concerns was about the poor record-keeping practices. Now, are you concerned that there is widespread corruption that is ongoing?
I think the confusion that we saw with the record keeping, and I would tell you that it's probably some of the worst records keeping I have seen in a long time, is because there was no documentation outside of record keeping. When an individual receives an invoice and it's not clear what app a worker was working on or what IT project a worker was working on, it's very difficult to allocate it in your records to the best place. And we actually saw journal entries where items were being moved around, and we needed to trace back through many steps in order to get to supporting documentation. At times, it was very clear that it was linked to ArriveCan. Other times, it required judgment to know whether or not it was of such a general nature that it should be associated with the ArriveCan or not. So it is about, making sure that the public servants have the information they need to make the right decisions. And in this case, there was a disregard for some of those really basic elements that we traditionally see.
Now, you are in communication with the CBSA president. Are you satisfied by the steps that have been taken so far to fix some of these practices that you've outlined?
So we haven't really looked at the steps that the agency has taken since. I do look at the fact that they're receiving many recommendations. There's recommendations from my report, recommendations from the ombuds. I would tell you that they're aligned and complementary, and the agency has a lot of work ahead of them to ensure that what I would think are some of the most basic elements around project, contract management, and record keeping need to be fixed.
And do you think that people working from home or working remotely had an impact on poor record keeping as well, or do you think that this is just an oversight on the part of the public service?
Well, I believe that the public service was trying to act quickly in an emergency, and I would tell you that while they were given flexibility from Treasury Board Secretariat to reduce some of the normal processes and red tape, it also came with a reminder that exercising due diligence and demonstrating prudent use of public funds should be done. And I think here that, an emergency was not an excuse to throw out the window the basic rules that the public service normally follows. And I would expect better from the public service, and I have seen the public service do better.
Thank you very much. Suivant, c'est la députée.
Next, Ms. Vignola, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan. Under 167, we see timesheets
that were given, and you see authorizations and signatures, but there's no detail as to the work done. So were these timesheets all from the same business, or was this a generalized problem?
Okay, I'm going to pause this for a moment to look at the poll that you wonderful people, or the wonderful people, have put into. I can't vote, but cutting excessive spending seems to be a top priority, and it has, that seems to be winning right now. And then don't forget to vote. Well, I've also been trying to do that, and how I'm doing it is I've decided to, and this is something anyone else wants to do, whatever, have cheap hobbies. Learn new skills that are cheaper. My first skill, third skill of this year, I'm learning to write with my opposite hand. It cost me a box of pencils. Okay, the pencils were a little bit pricey. They were Stadlater, I admit. They're beautiful pencils. I have a very deep affection with Stadlater. I did took drafting in school, so in college. So I like it. Okay, but anyway, so that was my first. Okay, it cost me $15 for that hobby. Now the problem is now my second hand is now clearer than my original writing hand, which it's whatever. But cutting excessive spending is a beautiful thing to do, and like. Secondary. What else do you need for a hobby? Before you go to the gym, and what a lot of people do is they get a gym membership and go to the gym. It's best to start at home for about a month. Do 5 basic exercises, only 1 exercise a day. That's it. Just 1 a day, but 1 every day, and do it as much as you can throughout the day off a schedule. Build yourself up, and then when it comes to the point where you're so excited, that is when you can spend that extra money. When you've decided, you know what I mean? And, hey, this is worth it to spend the extra and the time and to go into the gym. And this is exactly my motto for the year: cutting my excessive spending, but through the cheapest methods. Another thing I'm doing, I'm taking a course on music. I'm not musically inclined. As anyone can tell, my voice is like scratching chalkboard. So learning music was never, no one wanted me to learn that anyway. So it's basically a thing. It cost me $50 a month to learn. These small things are saving me, huge. And at my same time. But what do you think? Who's lurking in here? Lurking. Okay, so thanks for voting. And let's hear. I like this Julie Vignola. I don't know if she's a separatist. But she's a bloc, but she usually has very good questions. She's a very she's a good MP. She's good at her job.
And was it always the same persons providing the authorizations? No, it was not always the same business, nor was it always the same individuals approving the timesheets. In some cases, we saw it very well done, and in other cases, a lack of essential information that should have been included. It is not a best practice to approve timesheets, and then after the timesheets are provided as justification for invoicing, it should have been the contractor who approved the timesheets, then a public servant. We also have cases where task authorizations, you have deliverables that are unclear. You don't know what the purpose was, what tasks were to be carried out. And yet, this is provided to GC. Now, what is this? Just a big open door to abuse? In my opinion, it is not flexibility. Flexibility might skip a couple steps, but it should not serve to remove essential information to manage a contract or to manage a project or to be truly accountable. if it's non-respect of essential elements that we should have seen in the procurement process and project management process. There are also contracts that were modified and signed off by CBSA.
I think she's wearing
PSPC,
Google Glass.
But they did not contain any modifications in the task. But in terms of deadlines and cost, there were changes made. Is that something you see often?
So, yeah, no, it isn't. All right, I'm going to read some comments, and then we're going to go right to it. Tom Ace. Ace is a singer. I got you. I just learned ACE. I would work on none of those directly in your poll. I would work on cutting all non-ask for unwanted government involvement. 70% minimum. The critical mineral strategy, which is the second lowest, is what I would work on, because I've seen this in another country. Actually, I can say it, United Arab Emirates. They're run by a freaking prince. He does a good job, like it or not. It's him doing a good job it makes me wonder about democracy. I'm fully in bed with democracy, but anyway, in Dubai, they've decided to maximize their resource management money and diversify. So use that money to diversify. So the Port of Miami isn't owned by anyone in the United States. It's owned by the it's actually the Emirate, Dubai Emirate, what province, Emirate, same word. So for me, how do you get money for the country without taxing the people? Well, it's resource management. And resources, we can go down 20 miles. We're not even going down at all, very deep at all. So there's lots of resources that we can go down deep. It can be done clean. That's, to me, makes sense. If we can get, because every ounce of gold we pull out of the ground, out of the mineral earth, not ounce of platinum that we pull out is less money that they have to take off of each individual taxpayer. It just, to me, is a brilliant situation. And Canada has one thing in abundance: natural resources. And second, we have technology. So we can be pushing the technology. So we're always ahead. As the world changes, we're going to need different resources. And we're going to be mining 2 miles down, not just this petty surface thing that we're basically doing now. Not strip mining. That's almost gone in Canada. I don't think you can get a permit for that very easily anymore. So we're going to go directly to House of Commons. And okay, so here her chin. It's a French thing. Sorry, I paused her at a unflattering spot
in your
analysis.
Well, that's another.
There, I'll pause her there. Oh, she's blinking. There. Duplicate billing. Yeah, the duplicate billing Poets Markets is mentioning. Yeah, that was going on. Les Blatniak. Want to stay in shape? Become a landscaper. Yeah, landscaping. Then you got to go outside during daylight hours. Yeah, not this generation. Liquid Gal, hello, is saying, doesn't matter which party is in power, CBC is government organization. Yeah, Pierre is saying he's going to cancel it. I don't want to see it canceled. I would like to see them a bit better. More shows that I'm eager to watch about Canada. Only about Canada. I don't care about the world when I want to watch the CBC, personally, unless they have a world news report, which they don't. 12 Monkeys. The 12 Monkeys, wasn't that a gang from that movie? And they were the people that saved animals and then killed the world? Yeah. I don't expect better from the lying public service. Well, I would expect better. The thing is you can't go into the public service and start asking questions. They'll surround you and the police won't go in there. They only pick on the weak. Okay, so let's see what we can see. Thank you for watching, everybody. And Okay, the microphone is on, and here, let's look at this beautiful picture. Whoa, hallelujah. And, all right.
Today, with their knowledge and expertise, Chinese Canadians immensely contribute to our technology sector to keep Canada at the forefront of the knowledge-based economy.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
I also recognize that the Chinese heritage has enhanced.
Okay, Chandra's talking. But, yeah, I agree. There's nothing wrong with them having sponsors because that's what it really is about. It's about, which side that politician support. One supports, let's, take from the weak and give to the wealthy, good people of the world, right? And then the other party is like, hey, we should help the weak so they can become the good people of the world. You know what I mean? I think we should have more obvious about what their side, because, hey, it's pretty close to 50-50. No one needs to hide anymore. At least, Mark works. Hi, Canada. Hello, everybody. All right, let's listen to Chandra. Arya.
The rich multicultural fabric of our wonderful country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
This past weekend, I shared a heartbreaking Facebook post. I reached out to Dave and Susan Gerard and asked them if I could share it here in the House of Commons. And they replied, yes, please. Here is some of the post, as I don't have time to read it all. After a long battle with addiction, our 28-year-old son, Ryan David Gerard, died of a drug overdose on February 8th, 2024. Beloved son of David and Susan, dear brother of Mitchell, cherished grandson of Ted and Betty Maker, and David, deceased, and Dolores Gerard. Our family would like to speak the truth about his death. Silence would mean Ryan's death was in vain, but if one person's life is saved by his story, I would tell it over and over. Fentanyl and opioids are terribly addictive substances, and unfortunately, addiction is a disease that has no cure. Ryan loved animals, water sports, hockey, and soccer. And when he was young, he was above average academically and athletically, but drugs stole his soul. Mr. Speaker, we must fight against these drugs that are killing 22 Canadians a day. It is our job to do better.
Okay, I need to stop because that was brilliant, and I love that she brought this, and I feel for the family of David Ryan. I personally have got off cigarettes, alcohol drinking, excessive going out and all this stuff, and a little bit of partying too much. Just gave it up, and it's not the easiest thing to do. They say it's actually one of the hardest things to give up is cigarettes because the addiction, and it's sociably acceptable. Alcohol is number two. Harder drugs, some of them that are highly addicting, are not as hard to get off because the social stigma is around them and it's easier. But the addiction thing, 30% is all that gets off at a maximum. It's usually around 5%. So basically, my belief is that we need to work on this. To me, if I can do it, and I'm not smart. If I can do it, get off cigarettes and all this stuff, anyone can, and that's part of the reason that book I'm writing. But it takes years. Think of it as a broken body. You have to fix every bone individually. So 2 years to get out of that mindset, at least. And the problem is a lot of these rehabs, they're only 3 months, right? So it's not long enough for people to change their full way of thinking, and that's my belief. And you need a longer-term solutions to actually have it work, because I'm all about FEC and effectiveness. And see, I stopped going out for a year, because how do you stop it? Well, you just don't go out. Don't see the same people. Change everything about what you do. If you write with your right hand, write with your left. Like, these are huge changes that take years, and I don't think that this country is putting enough into it, because we're like, oh, we'll write them off. But what we're doing is we're writing off billions of dollars, because every individual that we're writing off through a drug addiction, we've put millions of dollars in just into getting into grade 8. Just to get to grade 8, it's like $50 million of government spending goes into a person. It's an outrageous number. It is very high. And so just throwing it away willy-nilly, and while we're at the same time saying, hey, we need immigrants, which we don't know which way they're going to turn with the way things are in Canada, though, maybe they're going to get addicted as well. Like, I believe that we need to really focus on it, because we have drugs now that are 10 times more addictive than they were 30 years ago. The people that are running the show were not exposed to the addictive level of drugs as they are now, to my knowledge. And I think it's important. I don't know. It's just something that I'm working on. So I think, and if I can quit smoking and cigarettes and drinking and swearing, cursing, going out all the time, I think anyone can.
The honourable member from Scarborough Centre.
Hopeless would be what I am.
Thank you, Mr. Our family here, most of them for the very first time. It has been great to have Kent and Rebecca, Alex and Sam, Nicole, Washington, and their boys Nathaniel and Eli here with us. Unfortunately, my son Mac and Hannah were not able to come. Speaker, I ask all members to join me today in thanking those who support us in the important work we do in this place.
The honourable member from Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, with federal funding and federal leadership, we are changing how cities approve housing projects, with a greater focus on higher density housing, student housing, homes near transit, and affordable housing. We are going to get more homes built for Canadians at prices they can afford. Last week, I was proud to represent the Government of Canada at an important announcement in the great city of Charlottetown. Through the Housing Accelerator Fund, the Government of Canada and the city announced that they had reached an agreement to fast-track 300 housing units over the next 3 years. This work will help spur the construction of more than 1,000 homes over the next decade. I have every confidence that these numbers will be surpassed based on the uptake of developers to the suite of federal programs available, including the GST rebate on rental properties. My community is ready, willing, and able to do its part to address the housing crisis. With this agreement, our government is unlocking new opportunities for growth in Charlottetown. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, in June 2020, a movement was born in Hamilton, Ontario, in response to the murder of George Floyd. Sisters Ashley, Abigail, and Alexandria Montague, born and raised in my riding of Hamilton Mountain, felt compelled to take tangible action to support and uplift their community. They leveraged their considerable talents to unite and promote Black businesses in Hamilton through a platform they call Black Owned. What started as a seed of an idea on Instagram has blossomed into a full-fledged organization to support Black-owned businesses now across Ontario, with training and networking and partnerships with organizations and schools. Our government is also supporting Black-owned through targeted programs for Black youth, helping the Montague sisters expand and connect even more Black-owned businesses. They are the embodiment of excellence we celebrate during Black History Month, and I encourage everyone to visit blkowned.ca. Another Hamilton success story.
Here, here. Happy Black History Month. The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
The Prime Minister's ArriveCan app isn't worth the cost, and it's absolutely not worth the corruption. First, the ArriveCan app was supposed to cost $80,000, but it ended up costing at least $60 million.
Is he calling it ArriveCan?
No one knows for sure because of the complex web of corruption engaged in. But wait, it gets worse. $12 million went to well-connected Liberal insiders that did no work. And speaking of no work, it actually didn't work. In 1 month alone, 10,000 people were sent to quarantine that didn't have to be quarantined. And today, the Parliamentary Budget Officer says there was a glaring disregard of basic management. They can't even manage their corruption properly. What we know for sure is this. The ArriveCan app is not worth the cost, and it's not worth this Prime Minister's corruption.
The honourable member from Halifax West.
February 19 is Heritage Day in Nova Scotia, a day I'm proud to have played a role in creating in law in 2013. This year, we honor Petty Officer William Hall, the first Black person, first Nova Scotian, and third Canadian to receive the Victoria Cross for valor and bravery. His heroic actions as a crew member of the HMS Shannon are well documented, and I'm looking forward to attending the commissioning ceremony for the new HMCS William Hall, named in his honor this spring. To mark Heritage Day, I'm distributing family activity packs, joining Friends of Clayton Park's event at the Canada Games Centre, supporting 2 free community skates at St. Margaret Centre in Upper Tantallon, and at the BMO Centre at Gary Martin Drive. Profitez-vous bien avec vos...
Take advantage of the time with your loved ones, and I wish you a happy Nova Scotia Heritage Day.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Well, ArriveCan has officially arrived as the next big Liberal scandal. In a damning report, the Auditor General stated that this Prime Minister's ArriveCan app wasted millions of dollars because of corruption and incompetency. Here are a few highlights from the report. The government had a massive multi-million-dollar contract based on a missing and potentially fictional proposal. The app cost at least $60 million, or at least we think so. It could be way more. They don't know. What we do know is that they lost track of $12 million. Wow. If that doesn't paint the picture for you, imagine a contract being signed while shady contractors and lobbyists are lobbying government officials. It's incredible. These Liberals have a complete disrespect for taxpayers and taxpayer dollars. This app should have cost $80,000. Instead, it cost $60 million. These Liberals are not worth the cost, and they are definitely not worth the corruption.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
After 8 years, this Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost or corruption of his ArriveCan app that we didn't need and didn't work. The Auditor General found this app was the worst NDP Liberal mismanagement she has ever seen. An $80,000 app turned into a $60 million scandal at least. It's impossible to determine the actual cost thanks to this Prime Minister's complex corruption. At least $12 million went to Liberal insiders that did no work. This Prime Minister continues to demonstrate him and his ArriveCan app are not worth the cost or corruption. The SNC-Lavalin scandal saw strong women getting kicked out of the caucus for standing up to his corruption. The WE scandal saw another minister take the fall for this Prime Minister's family getting paid off. As the RCMP continues their criminal investigation, another cabinet minister could get thrown under the bus to cover up this Prime Minister's crime, chaos, and corruption. After 8 years, Canadians cannot afford any more of this costly, corrupt Prime Minister.
The honourable member from Labrador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to outline my support for Bill C-49, amendments to the Atlantic Accord, which has many opportunities for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and Nova Scotians. The government of Newfoundland and Labrador has led offshore oil and gas in this country for decades. Now they are looking to lead offshore wind energy in North America. We might be a small province, Mr. Speaker, but we are an innovative province, one that is ready to move forward with good, environmentally sustainable energy projects. This is the opportunity of a generation to lead in offshore energy in Canada, creating nearly 30,000 skilled trade jobs and a stable economy at home. I am disappointed that the Conservatives are against this bill. The last time Conservatives tried to axe the Atlantic Accord, royalties, benefits, and jobs for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians was under Stephen Harper in 2006. It is quite obvious, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives don't support Atlantic Canada.
The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, the city of Timmins has lost a political icon. Mayor Victor M. Power has gone to the Angels. Nobody loved Timmins more than Vic. He started out as a high school guidance counselor, and Vic brought those skills and concern for people in public life. And the thing about Vic was that he knew everybody. He knew your family history and the name of every cousin and nephew. Now, of course, Vic couldn't have done it without his loving wife, Clarice. They were the ultimate power couple. She knocked on every door during the election. She was the hostess who made you feel welcome, and Clarice brought class, culture, and pride to our northern city. Vic first ran for council in 1966. He gave the city 4 decades of public service and oversaw the transition from a roughneck mining town to a regional center of business, health, and education. He set a standard that politicians at every level should want to emulate. On behalf of Canada's Parliament, we mourn the loss of Vic and thank him and Clarice for their dedication to the North and the people of Timmins.
The
Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, today I'm delighted to welcome to the Hill guests who are particularly important to my riding. I'm talking about the young members of the 953rd Aviation Squadron from Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Their involvement and constant presence in my community is solid. Founded in March 1995 by Mr. Robert Ledoux, 70 cadets already answered the call, and the president at the time, Mr. Serge Roy, left us too soon, but he still took part in the squadron's first flight. His legacy will live on forever in the shared memories of its members. The 953rd Squadron stands out in many ways, whether it's in sports, shooting, or summer camps. Excellence is not an option. It's constantly assured. Its members are also extremely involved in their community. I'm honored to be able to count on such a dynamic squadron in my region, and I wish these members a most rewarding visit to Parliament Hill. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Death, taxes, and Liberal corruption, 3 things that are certain in Canada after 8 years of this Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wasted $60 million on an app that was supposed to cost $80,000, that didn't work, that didn't keep anyone safe, and that erroneously forced 10,000 people into quarantine. It cost 750 times more than they said it would. The corruption runs deep beyond just the wasteful, self-righteous Big Brother policies of this Prime Minister. Here's what the auditors had to say. A glaring disregard for basic management, insiders setting the terms, $12 million on well-connected consultants that did no work on this app. At a time where Canadians are struggling because of this Prime Minister's costly incompetence, ArriveCan should have been dead on arrival. With this Prime Minister's app, there is no one left to blame. He should look in the mirror or face Canadians who know he is not worth the cost and he is not worth the corruption.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton-Canso.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today as my riding of Cape Breton-Canso recovers from one of the heaviest snowfalls in recorded history. I remain very concerned for those in my riding who still require assistance, in particular our seniors and other populations in need. But let me be clear, the snowfall is an ongoing challenge for Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia, and our government is acting on it. We've provided boots on the ground to dig out homes, helicopters to transport evacuees and supplies, and heavy equipment to clear the snow from our communities. Now, we continue to support the province and municipalities as they lead recovery operations. I also wish to thank the many people, Mr. Speaker, who volunteered their time toward helping their communities. From sports teams to heavy equipment operators to Team Rubicon and our own Canadian Coast Guard cadets, we thank you for everything you've done. In times of crisis, Mr. Speaker, our people are truly stronger together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Prime Minister could have followed our common sense plan to fix the budget, stop crime, and so on, but instead he decided to waste $60 million when Canadians can't afford food or rent. And this was a scandal, the ArriveCan app that we didn't even need, which falsely sent 10,000 people into quarantine and enriched Liberal cronies. Isn't it true that that app was not worth the cost, just like the Liberal government is not worth the cost? The Honourable Minister, Mr. Speaker, we've read the Auditor General's report. We've accepted her recommendations. The only thing I agree with my colleague opposite on is that anyone responsible for managing taxpayer money must follow strict rules. The rules in this case were not followed. We accept the recommendations to make sure this never happens again. And Mr. Speaker, we will always remain responsible when it comes to taxpayer money. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. So he's going to punish those responsible for this scandal? It should start with the Prime Minister himself. He should have had the courage to stand and defend himself rather than hiding behind another. This was an app we didn't need. It forced 10,000 people into quarantine when they shouldn't have. It enriched contractors who did nothing. They did no work and simply offered members of the Liberal government whiskey that's simply not worth the cost. Before we hear the answer, I just ask everyone to please remain a bit more quiet so that the Speaker can hear the questions and the answers. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we thank the Auditor General who
Did he just say
are in
very,
favor
very
of
quiet?
her recommendations around ArriveCan. Many of these recommendations have already been implemented. Others will be shortly, including new measures to guarantee that deliverables are clearly identified in procurement contracts. We will continue to ensure that contracts awarded by our government are done so in a responsible, open way.
Crisis of doubling housing costs and 22 million people forced to food banks, the Prime Minister could have followed our common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Instead, he blew over $60 million on an ArriveCan app that we didn't need, didn't work, sent 10,000 people erroneously into quarantine, losing income, all the while the thing costed 750 times more than the Prime Minister promised. Won't he stand up today and admit that the app is just like him? It's not worth the cost, it's not worth the corruption.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows very well that the moment there were allegations around cost overruns or inappropriate contracting practices, the Canadian Border Services Agency immediately began an internal audit and made the appropriate referrals to the appropriate authorities. We take the obligation to manage taxpayers' money very seriously. Under no circumstances would we condone what the Auditor General determined to be contracting practices that did not follow the rules, and anybody who didn't will be held to account.
Absolutely. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, if he wants to hold someone to account for the ArriveCan, why not hold the one person who had the authority to create the ArriveCan and who had the authority to stop the ArriveCan, and that's the Prime Minister of Canada. He is the government. This was a government program we warned wasn't needed, wouldn't work, and now we know it went 750 times over budget. 75% of the contractors did no work at all, but they did buy whiskey and other treats for the top Liberal government officials. Again, won't the Prime Minister admit the app is just like him? Not worth the cost, not worth the corruption.
The Honourable Minister for Public Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague from Public Safety said earlier, we would like to thank the Auditor General and welcome her recommendations on the ArriveCan application. Some of that report recommendations have already been implemented. Some will soon be implemented, including the introduction of new measures to ensure that tasks and deliverables are clearly defined in future professional services contracts. We are committed to continuing to ensure that contracts are delivered in a fair, efficient, and transparent manner.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And again, the Prime Minister is hiding under a rock, refusing to stand up and explain himself after he blew $60 million on this ArriveCan while Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, or house themselves. This scam involved taking money that could be used for border security, like scanning the 99% of shipping containers that go without any inspection from our ports with stolen cars, not to mention other things that Canadians could have done with that money. Instead, it stuffed the pockets of 75% of the contractors who did no work. Again, will the Prime Minister admit that the Arrive scam is not worth the cost and not worth the corruption?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the Leader of the Opposition would mention investing in border security when his government cut 1,000 officers that did the exact kind of work that he's now pretending he wants to invest in, when they eliminated 50% of the intelligence capacity in the Border Services Agency to work with local, provincial police and the RCMP. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no lessons to take in investing in border security from somebody who gutted the Border Services Agency.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. For La Prairie, rather. Sorry. It wasn't perfect when Quebec introduced medical aid in dying, but some people were suffering, so we focused on the elements where there was a consensus. We wanted to move things forward. That was the humane approach, and that's the approach that's lacking today in Ottawa. There's a consensus both in Quebec and in Canada. People suffering from things like Alzheimer's should be able to make advance requests. Why not move forward on the basis of that consensus instead of kicking the can down the road until 2027 at least? Do patients deserve to be abandoned until 2027? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, MAID is a profoundly personal and complex situation. I respect the work that Quebec has done in the advance request area. Canadians deserve clear standards about what is criminal and what isn't. People should... There's an exception for Quebec on this issue, and we will be working with Quebec in the run-up to the next steps. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. By accepting this motion to postpone MAID until 2027, these three parties are abandoning patients. They refuse to respect the consensus in Canada. But what about the consensus in Quebec? Quebec is ready. Quebec wants to allow advance requests. The National Assembly is unanimous on this. They want advance requests. And Conservative in Quebec agree, but these Conservatives here don't care because for them, Quebec isn't important. When will the government listen to Quebec? And authorize advance requests. The Honourable Minister of Justice. Since the very beginning, Mr. Speaker, when we dealt with MAID, we took a cautious approach. We tried to balance individual autonomy with protections for vulnerable peoples. We've taken a prudent approach, and we want to treat these issues in a thoughtful way after consulting Quebecers and Canadians, and that's what we will continue to do. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Garbage decisions. The Auditor General found that the Liberal government wasted almost $60 million on the ArriveCan app that no one uses and doesn't even work. All at a time when Canadians are struggling to put food on the table and pay their rent or mortgage. Why are the Liberals so
Colleagues, I'm going to ask if, as I'd asked at the beginning of question period, if you could please keep your comments to the time that you have questions so I could hear the Honourable Member ask a question and also to hear the Honourable Member answer a question. The Honourable Member from Burnaby South from the top, please.
I think the Conservatives were upset that I forgot to mention their scandals with the Phoenix pay system and Deloitte. They also have their own scandals to worry about. I should have mentioned that as well. But let's talk about the garbage decisions of this Liberal government. The Auditor General found that the Liberals wasted $60 million on an app, the ArriveCan app, that no one uses and doesn't work. All at a time when Canadians are struggling with their groceries and their rent. Why are the Liberals so obsessed with making rich consultants richer and so out of touch with where Canadians are at?
The The Honourable Minister for Public Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as we said earlier, we are grateful to the Auditor General for her report, which was important and timely. We have accepted all her recommendations. Some of them have already been implemented over the last few weeks. Some are being implemented. We look forward to more opportunities to work with her so that we make our procurement system as transparent, equitable, and fair as Canadians expect it to be.
L'honorable député de Burnaby-Sud.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. The Auditor General found that the Liberals had wasted at least $60 million for work that the public service could have done. People are unable to afford food, and these Liberals, who are out of touch with reality, are throwing Canadians' money out the window. Why are the Liberals so obsessed with making private consultants rich? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we obviously thank the NDP leader for his question. We share his concerns about the need to manage taxpayer money appropriately, and what the Auditor General identified were circumstances that were not at all appropriate, and that is why people at CBSA and PSPC have taken steps, the necessary steps, to ensure that this type of situation never recurs. We will always remain focused on managing Canadians' money well.
Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
The Prime Minister's Arrive scam was supposed to cost taxpayers $80,000, but it was confirmed by the Auditor General that it in fact cost more than $60 million. And after 8 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, we know that he's not worth the cost, and he's definitely not worth the corruption. And this process was so corrupt that his favorite company of two guys in a basement, GC Strategies, got to write the contract for themselves to the exclusion of everybody else. And we know they did no IT work. That's been confirmed, but they got paid $20 million for their trouble. So will this Prime Minister just admit that he's lining the pockets of insiders at the expense of Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, just because our colleague repeats a series of allegations that are not borne out by the facts does not make them true. Absolutely. The facts are, Mr. Speaker, the very moment that there were allegations of inappropriate contracting practices, an internal audit was begun by the President of the Border Services Agency, and referrals were made to the appropriate authorities, including the RCMP. Anybody who did not follow the contracting rules, Mr. Speaker, will be held to account. My friend knows that, and he shouldn't ascribe a series of responsibility where it doesn't exist.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Canadians want us and expect us to ascribe responsibility to the individual responsible, and that's this Prime Minister. This app was supposed to cost $80,000. It cost more than $60 million. They've been under RCMP investigation by the Procurement Ombudsman, by the Auditor General, and the results so far are damning for this government, that they've lined the pockets of insiders while Canadians are lined up at food banks. It's absolutely unacceptable that the cost overruns have seen $20 million go to a company that did absolutely no work on the app. Why are they putting their friends ahead while Canadians suffer?
MP Baird, he's pretty hard hitting all the time. And also, I wanted to mention at Liberal MP LeBlanc, you know, I'm a student of rhetoric, anything that's rhetorically speaking. And any of that persuasion and whatever you want to call it. And Dominic LeBlanc, MP, you know, he's been under a lot of fire because a lot of times when problems come, he gets put in there, and he's done it. He does a pretty darn good job firing back. You know, from sometimes which a lot of people, especially viewers here, would say is from a weaker position, right? But he's you know, he has to do his job, and I think he does it well. And another one who I want to mention right now, who I know no one will agree, but our former finance minister Morneau, he was good. Pierre was all over him, and the way that he held his composure was something of a note in the House of Commons. Like Pierre was just throwing it at him, like all this stuff, and he held pretty good, and in the same position as LeBlanc. Just as a student of rhetoric, I just want to mention it. What do you think? Leave a comment. Tell me off. Have a good.
The Honourable Minister for Public Works.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague responsible for public safety just said, this misinformation and disinformation is completely unacceptable. What was known was that the border had to be closed and that billions of dollars worth of international trade were at stake. What we heard from the Auditor General this morning was that the situation was unacceptable, so we need to work hard on making sure that things are done properly in the public service of Canada.
The Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the cost or the corruption to Canadians. Today, the Auditor General informed us that ArriveCan, an app that was supposed to cost $80,000, will now cost Canadians a minimum of $60 million. It gets worse. Due to documentation that the AG says was deleted or destroyed, it could be more than $60 million. Wow. She doesn't know who worked on ArriveCan, if the work was fulfilled to requirements, or if it was even completed at all. So why did the Prime Minister rig the process so that insiders get rich and taxpayers foot the bill?
The Honourable Member for Public Security.
Again, Mr. Speaker, repeating the last part of my honourable friend's question does not make it true. Nope. What is true, Mr. Speaker, is that at the moment contracting practice irregularities were identified, the Border Services Agency took all of the steps appropriate to determine exactly what were the facts and to hold those responsible to account in the case that that's necessary. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General identified a series of contracting practices that were not followed. The government does not condone that behavior and has taken all the steps to make sure that those circumstances don't repeat themselves.
Here, here. The Honourable Member from Calgary-Midnaport.
Every word I say is true, and that member knows it. The Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the cost or corruption. Contractors were paid over $1,000 a day, even though 18% of the invoices for these contracts had no supporting documentation. So we don't even know if the contractors completed the work. GC Strategies pocketed almost $20 million and yet completed no work themselves. It gets worse. They wrote the requirements for the $25 million contract that they won. Simple question for the Prime Minister. How is he going to get our money back?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Auditor General identified some contracting practices that were clearly not followed. Mr. Speaker, under no circumstance is that an acceptable circumstance. Governments have responsibility to manage taxpayers' funds in the most effective way possible. That's why we have accepted all of the Auditor General's recommendations. And the good news, Mr. Speaker, is the Border Services Agency and the Procurement Department had already begun to act to put in place a number of oversight measures before the Auditor General's report, and we look forward to fully implementing everything that she suggested.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Les-Sables. The Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the money. It's not worth the unjustified cost. It's not worth the lack of expense justification. It's not worth the blatant lack of accounting practices. And it's also not worth the 10,000 people who were quarantined without justification. According to the Auditor General, the Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the minimum $60 million paid by Canadians. It's not worth the corruption. Does the Prime Minister realize that? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In times of crisis, the Government of Canada has two responsibilities. One is to provide for people's safety and security, and the second is to follow their internal processes. And there were tens of thousands of Canadians who died in the pandemic. There was billions of dollars worth of international trade at risk, and the borders had to be closed. And so the Auditor General has made some findings about unacceptable mismanagement by people at CBSA. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Les-Sables. almost all Liberals voted against this investigation by the Auditor General. The app was supposed to cost 80 grand. It cost and ended up costing at least 60 million. The Prime Minister's app is not worth the cost, the 750% cost overrun. GC Strategies, a two-person company that did no IT work, got $20 million, and the CBSA was unable to tell the Auditor General who chose to hire and pay GC Strategies. Does the Prime Minister realize that it's not worth the cost or the corruption? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the COVID crisis in 2020, there was $1 billion worth of trade at stake. There were people dying every day in hospitals and long-term care. The government had to act quickly. In spite of that, the lack of information sharing and financial practices by CBSA was unacceptable, as the Auditor General reported this morning. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. The Auditor General's report on the ArriveCan app is catastrophic. It cost $60 million, almost $20 million of which was pocketed by GC Strategies, and they did absolutely no work. The government turned a blind eye to this, and contractors clearly profited from this with the help of government officials. This $60 million scandal was initially estimated to be a contract worth only $80,000. How is it possible to have a cost overrun of 750% without any minister getting involved? The Honourable Minister. 150,000 travelers per day cross the border, and CBSA had to deal with this. There was also food and medications that needed to cross the border. So we needed an app quickly to allow these people and goods to flow. In spite of all that, CBSA failed to take appropriate steps to manage all of this. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. The Auditor General showed that the call for tenders for ArriveCan was not competitive. But she couldn't say who at CBSA decided to choose GC Strategies. So there was no way of knowing who was responsible. And while a company of just two people pocketed $20 million for doing nothing, why hasn't this individual been identified and held to account? When it comes to ArriveCan, accountability will arrive when? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, in our view, accountability is extremely important, and that is precisely why, as soon as we were informed of these allegations of irregular contracting practices, we took the necessary steps. We did an internal audit, which is still underway. We took corrective steps where necessary, and we read the Auditor General's report immediately today, and we will follow through on everything she's suggested. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. ArriveCan cost $60 million, but that's not even clear. According to the Auditor General, the true cost is impossible to calculate because of CBSA's poor financial record keeping. But she does know that 18% of the providers gave no details with their invoices. So we don't know who did what. She also knows that 4 out of 5 resources for evaluating security couldn't prove that real work had been done. How is it possible that no one in the government sounded the alarm before this became public knowledge? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think this demonstrates how important it is for the public service to do their work properly, even in moments of crisis like we went through with COVID-19. It's true that there was a danger that billions of dollars were being lost on a weekly basis in economic activity. People lost their jobs and their lives because of COVID. But that is what led to the information from the Auditor General this morning.
Saskatchewan. The two insiders at GC Strategies worked with the NDP Liberal government to set the requirements of ArriveCan contracts, which GC Strategies then got. In other words, the process was rigged. The government massively overpaid for this $60 million glitchy app because the process was rigged. It was rigged so that GC Strategies got $20 million from taxpayers and did no actual work. After 8 years, it's clear that this Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the cost or the corruption. Why did the Prime Minister rig the process to pay insiders and punish taxpayers?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, again, my colleague can repeat a series of things that the facts don't bear out. What we can say, Mr. Speaker, is that the government takes extremely seriously the obligation of public servants to follow the contracting rules. That's exactly what the President of the Canadian Border Services Agency has assured me that she's doing. And she's also assured me that she's taken a series of corrective measures before today's Auditor General report and will continue to do whatever is required to ensure that taxpayers' money is always handled in the appropriate way.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, everything I said is directly in the Auditor General's report. So the Minister can't claim he's listening to that report and yet deny what I said. Well-connected insiders average $1,100 per day for working on this contract. Wow. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. The Prime Minister's ArriveCan process was clearly rigged, and now Canadians are out tens of millions of dollars when they can least afford it. Why did the Prime Minister rig the process to pay insiders and punish taxpayers?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Again, Mr. Speaker, when the Border Services Agency was made aware of allegations around inappropriate contracting practices, the appropriate authorities were called in. An internal audit was ordered, an audit, by the way, which is still in progress. And, Mr. Speaker, if people did something that was not appropriate or met a criminal standard, they will obviously be held to account. The government has been very clear. All of these processes to respect taxpayers' money are essential, and that's exactly what we're going to put into place.
The Honourable Member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
After 8 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost or the corruption. The Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the cost or the corruption. Today, the Auditor General revealed that well-connected insiders and consultants were making $1,100 per day, almost twice the inflated government rate. The auditor also found it disturbing that an app that should have cost $80,000 cost $60 million that we know of. Why did the Prime Minister rig the process to pay insiders and punish taxpayers?
The Honourable Minister for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, we thank the Auditor General for her important report, which not only we took great gratitude to see this morning, but we have followed many of the recommendations that we find in that report, including improving evaluation requirements and work experience data, increasing record keeping on subcontracting work, and suspending authorities temporarily for task authorizations until we are confident that better procedures are not only put into place, but also better monitored.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, unbelievably, the Liberal government has authorized $28.5 million of new military exports to Israel since October. Today, a Dutch court ruled the Netherlands must stop spending F-35s to Israel. Spain and Belgium have suspended arms sales, but Canada continues to send arms, doing nothing to ensure that they are not being used against civilians. So many children are being killed as Netanyahu bombs Rafah, the place where Palestinians were told they'd be safe. How can the minister continue to sell arms to Israel?
The Honourable Minister for Global Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, it's important to make sure that we understand what we're talking about here. There's a wide range of items that require an export permit. When we look at the permits to Israel in particular, let me be clear. I have not received and therefore have not approved any export permits of weapons to Israel since October 7, and any permits issued since October 7 were essentially non-lethal permits. Canada has a very robust export control system. We abide by the UN Arms Trade Treaty, and we take this responsibility very seriously.
Good job.
L'honorable député de New Westminster Burnaby.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Harmful content are costing children their lives. In December, a 12-year-old boy in BC died by suicide after experiencing online sextortion. Sadly, this is becoming more and more common, and this government has done nothing. Liberals promised to protect our kids from online harm within 100 days of the last election. Well, they do nothing. Kids' lives are at risk. When will the Liberals start protecting children by acting on online harms?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, the targeting of children in this country is extremely troubling. It is depraved, and frankly, I find it disgusting as a parent. What the member opposite is highlighting is a problem that absolutely requires a remedy. What we are proposing is comprehensive legislation that will do everything necessary to keep Canadian children safe. Safe from those who would prey upon them in online spaces, safe from those who would keep them away from their parents and the protection that they need. That is the type of protection we will legislate, and we will do it forthwith.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the war in Gaza has been devastating for so many innocent Palestinians. Gaza is one of the worst places in the world to be. While we were the first Western government to actively provide life-saving aid, the silence from the party opposite has been deafening. Can the Minister of International Development please tell us how important it is that we all come together and support efforts to get aid to those desperate civilians who have been devastated by this war?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Mr. Speaker, the war in Gaza has been devastating to so many innocent Palestinian civilians. That is why our government has provided more than $100 million in humanitarian aid, making us one of the top donors in the world. I was recently disappointed to hear comments made by the Conservative candidate for York Centre saying that any and all aid to Palestinian civilians will somehow fund terrorism, even through the Red Cross. So while the Conservatives are indifferent to Palestinian civilian suffering, we will remain steadfast in supporting humanitarian support to Palestinian civilians.
That is nonsense, and you know it.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, please is an experienced member and understands that the people who have the floor should be talking. The Honourable Member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, 2 words for this government: jaw-dropping. Today, the Auditor General revealed that the Prime Minister paid almost $20 million to GC Strategies for his Arrive scam. This 2-person consulting company working out of their basement performed no actual IT work on the app. This amount is double what the government previously reported. Will the Prime Minister admit that he rigged the system to pay well-connected Liberal insiders while fleecing taxpayers?
Terrible, terrible.
The Honourable Minister for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a time of crisis, a responsible government has 2 responsibilities. First, to protect the health and safety of its citizens.
Yes, exactly.
Second, to ensure the efficiency of its internal system. What we know from COVID-19 is that a daily cost of $1 billion in economic cost to Canadians occurred every day. What we also know that hundreds of people were dying every week. But at the same time, this is no excuse for the type of recommendation and finding that the Auditor General deposited today, and that's why we are going to continue to implement.
The Honourable Member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, as outlined by the Auditor General, the pandemic urgency can never justify corruption and oversight failures outlined in this report. The awarding of contractors favor GC Strategies, securing almost $20 million without competition.
The CBSA's disregard for basic management practices compromised accountability, competition, and value for money. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. Will fleeced Canadian taxpayers get their money back?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my colleague that a global pandemic and the rush to put in place a series of measures to protect the health and safety of Canadians does not exclude public servants from following the appropriate contracting rules that are in place. So, Mr. Speaker, we agree with the Auditor General when she says that those rules were not followed in a way that was acceptable. And, Mr. Speaker, as we've said, we're putting in place, and we already have put in place, a series of measures to ensure that this circumstance is never repeated again.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, today we found out about the Auditor General's disastrous report on ArriveCan. This confirms that there was a scandalous lack of oversight and transparency. In his mandate letter, the former president of the Treasury Board was supposed to, and I quote, raise the bar for government openness, efficiency, and transparency. The member for Quebec was responsible for auditing spending on these contracts totaling millions of dollars. Will the former president of the Treasury Board apologize to Canadians for having failed in his duties? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement, Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for reminding us of the importance of responsible government. A responsible government protects the health and safety of its people, especially in a crisis like COVID-19, which is the worst crisis in a century and the worst economic crisis since the 1930s. We had to act swiftly to save hundreds, thousands even of lives. But despite that, we find that the Auditor General's conclusions and findings are unacceptable, and next time we will have to do better. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the Minister that he was President of the Treasury Board of Canada. It was his responsibility to ensure that public funding was properly managed. Now, during that period, during the pandemic, 23 companies received hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts. Businesses which were not named, they were listed as companies A, B, C, D, and so on the government website. I raised this issue in committee in 2021. Today, we've received confirmation that there was, I quote, blatantly disregarded basic management practices. Can the former president of the Treasury Board admit that he failed in his duty to protect Canadian taxpayers' money? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the duties of the Canadian government at the time was to ensure that the border with the United States would remain open for hundreds of thousands of Canadians transiting the border every day, and billions of dollars in equipment, food, medications, that would continue transiting through as well. That was why we created ArriveCan, so that the United States, led by President Trump, would not fully close the border, because we needed all those things and people going through the border, and that was important in my riding and in the riding of my Conservative colleague.
Député de Lac-Saint-Jean. Monsieur le Président, tout le monde.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, everyone can see that the Liberals have been irresponsible when it comes to immigration. But they can change. They can start mending face tenses today. They can support the Bloc Québécois motion to consult Quebec in order to review immigration targets based on intake capacity. They can also send a clear signal immediately with a single stroke of a pen, Mr. Speaker. They can write Quebecers a check for $470 million to pay for the intake of asylum seekers since 2021. Mr. Speaker, will the government finally reimburse Quebecers? The Honourable Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that the member across the way agrees with me that immigration is an indispensable resource for Canada, for Quebec, and for our economy. What the member is proposing is a motion that Quebec wasn't even consulted on, and now the member is acting as spokesperson for other provinces. Even though we consult with those provinces annually, we have made responsible decisions, and we will continue making responsible decisions with responsible governments. Well, The Liberals, they don't want to face reality when it comes to immigration. Quebec's immigration capacity has been exceeded. It has been exceeded, in particular because of the federal government's inaction on asylum seekers. Since 2021, our public services and community organizations have been shouldering a completely disproportionate share of the responsibility for receiving asylum seekers. Quebec is doing too much, while all other provinces except Ontario are doing too little. Will the federal government finally call on the provinces that are not doing their fair share? The Honourable Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Minister. Well, there are two provinces doing more than their fair share, Ontario and Quebec. Quebec has done a lot of work to welcome asylum seekers, those who arrive at the Trudeau Airport and those who arrive at Roxham Road. But we have transferred $5.2 billion to Quebec since 2015. Half of that funding is from our government for temporary housing. We will do more, and we can work together.
Eagle Creek.
Earlier today, we learned that the Prime Minister's ArriveCan app was not worth the cost or the corruption. The Auditor General found a glaring disregard for mismanagement practices. The process was rigged from the beginning, which appears to be business as usual. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxpayers are paying a high price for Liberal insiders, and Canadians want answers. Will the NDP Liberal coalition come clean with Canadians or continue the cover-up?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Again, Mr. Speaker, far from cover-up, this government has cooperated with parliamentary inquiries that are looking into this matter. Our government proactively sent internal audit reviews to a parliamentary committee, and the Conservative chair decided not to share them with the members. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no lessons to take on acting in a transparent manner. We have said from the beginning that any allegations of inappropriate contracting practices need to face the most severe consequences. That's exactly what this government will do.
The Honourable Member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Well, this from the minister responsible for clam scam. After 8 years, it has never been clearer. This Prime Minister's ArriveCan app is not worth the cost or the corruption. Rules were ignored, the government overpaid, and Canadians are kept in the dark. The system is so corrupt that only this Prime Minister could have thought it up. The rot starts at the top. This NDP Liberal government is trying to cover it up. Will this coalition allow the study of ArriveCan to continue, or will they shut it down to keep their buddies safe?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague refers to the work of a parliamentary committee. As I said in the previous answer, our government has collaborated at all times with the parliamentary committee. Mr. Speaker, the president of the Border Services Agency, at my suggestion, sent a copy of the preliminary internal audit to the committee. The Conservative chair decided not to share it with the members because it might somehow prevent them from asking a series of partisan questions to bureaucrats who were there to appear before the committee. So, Mr. Speaker, we have been transparent and will continue to be at all times.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this government's incompetence, here's some more evidence that they're not worth the cost or the corruption. Get this, the ArriveCan app had a starting budget of $80,000 and it ended up costing over $60 million. That's 700 times more expensive than anticipated. Mr. Speaker, what was there in between $80,000 and $60 million? Well, bogus invoices paid out of the pockets of Canadian taxpayers. Can we find out who received all this money? This is a scandal of epic proportions. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the scandal would have been if the Canadian government hadn't taken its responsibility of protecting the health and safety of Canadians, including in the riding of Lévis-Lotbinière, where hundreds of people's jobs depended on effective, efficient, rapid transit between Canada and the United States. $1 billion in trade every day. But despite that, the Auditor General's recommendations this morning are cause for concern, and we will continue to work on them and address them over the upcoming weeks. The Honourable Member for Madawaska, Restigouche. Mr. Speaker, economic indicators in Canada seem to indicate that Canada is in an enviable position faced with the rest of the world, but some Canadians are still concerned about affordability and about the economy. Can the minister tell us about some recent economic successes and what they mean for our overall growth? The Honourable Innovation Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his excellent question. Yes, Canadians are concerned currently, but there are some important economic gains that will be significant and positive for Canadians. For instance, last month, our economy created 37,000 jobs in Canada. Unemployment is going down, and women's participation in the labor force has hit record highs. We have also made generational historic investments in biomanufacturing, in natural resources, and in other industries. Canada is positioning itself as an economic leader of the 21st century.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, it's clear that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. And what else isn't worth the cost? The Prime Minister's $60 million ad scam app. What started out as an $80,000 app is now at $60 million, and the Auditor General can't confirm that it won't go higher. Wow. Taxpayers do not get value for the Prime Minister's $60 million ad scam app, as the Auditor General has stated. Will the Prime Minister come clean and tell us how much taxpayers are going to be truly fleeced for his ArriveCan app?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, once again, our government has, at the very first opportunity when these allegations were made, taken all of the appropriate steps to ensure that taxpayers' money is respected. The Border Services Agency President ordered an internal investigation. Those preliminary findings were shared with the committee, for which my honourable colleague is very familiar. It's too bad that the chair of that committee chose not to share, for example, that report with the members of the committee. Our government is being transparent and will always be to ensure that taxpayers' money is well spent.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton West.
Speaker, it was that minister's department that hid the RCMP investigation from the Auditor General. Mr. Speaker, it was also his party that had those documents on Wednesday, and what did they do with it? They filibustered and then voted to excuse the witness. So it's very clear this government, every chance they get, will cover up the ArriveCan scandal. So, quick question. What is the government trying to hide? When will it truly come clean on ArriveCan?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the government is interested in the utmost transparency in this matter. That's why the President of the Border Services Agency and her officials appeared before the committee. That's why, Mr. Speaker, an internal investigation was ordered. My colleague referred to a referral to the RCMP. It may surprise him, but it's not politicians that direct the operational work of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, so we can't speak to what exact investigations are being done. We have full confidence that they will hold those to account in the case that that's merited.
The Honourable Member from Perth Wellington.
Mr. Speaker, for 2 years, parliamentary committees have been investigating the cozy relationship between government officials and highly paid insiders. Documents tabled at committee show that the two-person in a basement firm GC Strategies were hosting dinners and whiskey tastings for the same government officials who were given multi-million-dollar contracts, all while government officials were getting mighty high bonuses. Can the chair of the mighty Government Operations Committee inform this House when the committee will next meet and when we will get answers for all Canadians?
The Honourable Chair of the Government Operations Committee.
Mr. Speaker, this Wednesday at Government Operations, it estimates the Auditor General will be appearing on her ArriveCan audit. Given today's report, we will be ordering the past and present ministers of public safety, procurement, health, and treasury boards, past and present, to answer for ArriveCan mismanagement and waste. GC Strategies, who we now learned were paid $20 million, will be issued a summons ordering their appearance. The committee will call every witness and compel every document to hold the government to account on ArriveCan.
The honourable member from St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, like many people across this country, I have been deeply disturbed by attacks.
Honourable member from St. John's East. I'm going to ask members, please, to allow the chair to hear the questions and the answers from all members. The honourable member from St. John's East from the top, please.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, like many people across the country, I have been deeply disturbed by attacks from the premiers of New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and now Alberta on vulnerable 2S LGBTQ plus students who are looking for privacy, dignity, and a safe place to be who they are. Far too often for this group, home is not a safe place. To the Minister of Employment Workforce Development, what can our government and people that believe in inclusion do to fight this discrimination?
Good question. The Honourable Minister for Economic Development.
Since Danielle Smith took to social media to threaten the privacy, the safety, and the dignity of queer and trans students, I have spoken to countless individuals who have told me how terrified they are about the discriminatory actions taken by the provincial government. I have one message for every person in Alberta who believes in the inclusive and equitable province that we know it is to be. What they need to do, Mr. Speaker, is call the silent Conservative MPs in this room, call the MLAs in Alberta, so that we can kill this bill before it gets to the floor of the legislature.
The honourable member from London Fanshawe.
Out-of-touch Liberals show time and again that they don't have the backs of brewery workers. Liberals are set to drastically increase the tax on beer in April. This will hurt breweries, small businesses, restaurants, and their unionized workers risk losing their jobs. Workers deserve better. Will the minister listen and reverse her decision to increase costs on those who are already struggling to keep their doors open?
Good question. Good question.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
I'm really glad to have a question about Canadian workers and Canadian jobs because it gives me a chance to share some good news that we got on Friday. The Canadian economy in January added 37,000 new jobs. That means we have 1.1 million more jobs than we had before COVID hit. Unemployment fell to 5.7%. And you know what? That is lower than it was at any time when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. Wow.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Hazim is a member of my community with family members trapped in Gaza, including his brothers, sister, and mother. Like so many, he worries he won't be able to get them to safety because unlike Ukraine, this government has imposed an arbitrary cap of 1,000 people who can qualify for special immigration measures. Worse still, other countries like Iceland have been successful in getting family members out in 2024 while Canada hasn't. What is the minister doing to compel Israel to allow Canadian visa holders to leave Gaza?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is inaccurate that we have been unable to extract people from Gaza in 2024. We have a unique program, unique in the world, to get family members of Canadians out from Gaza. It has yet been unsuccessful because of uncooperation from local authorities at the Rafah gates. We urge them to help us in getting those people across the border. That said, I have asked my department to review the humanitarian terms of the program to make sure they are complying with our obligations without compromising the security of Canadians. We will get people out, Mr. Speaker.
And so brings us to the end of oral questions today. I see the honourable member from Edmonton Manning, who is rising on a point of order.
Find unanimous consent for the following motion: that the House condemn the Prime Minister's past comment.
So, I'll ask the honourable member from Edmonton Manning. I heard at least on 3 occasions no. So I'm going to ask all colleagues who are going to be leaving this chamber, please, if you can carry on your conversations outside of the chamber. Alors, je demande à tous les députés.
So I'd ask all members who will be leaving the chamber, please. I see several people rising on points of order.
Lots of points of orders today.
The honourable member from Edmonton Manning, unfortunately, I heard many people say no to the demand for unanimous consent. I see the Minister for Women and Gender Equality rising on a point of order. So then, I hear...
Not having it. Fergie ain't having it. She got no'd before she spoke.
Order, please. I'm going to remind members that when there is an opportunity for the House to consider points of order on unanimous consent motions, it is very helpful for members to ensure that they have asked and sought unanimous consent, at least from the House officers, so that we could negotiate. It's not a rule, as the honourable member has pointed out, but it's a very good practice so that members' time, which is very, very valuable, is being best used. So we've had 2 members rise, 1 a minister, and I see that there was no unanimous consent. I see other people rising on an order, and I am going to go to...
It's going to be the Fergus hour.
Colleagues, we saw on 2 occasions members rise and immediately shouted down with no. That is an indication to the chair that there is not unanimous consent. It's also an indication to the chair that there has not been negotiations and discussions beforehand to try to make these unanimous consent motions adopted.
Holy crap. Wait a second here. Hold on. I got to pause that. I was actually not having read the rules, I would have gone the other way and just chastised the Conservatives. But he, so far, has gone saying no, that there wasn't consultations, and so the what's your motion, it won't stand because there wasn't consultations. And it seems like he's not going to let her say it. Well, let's see. But, this is a twist. There's a twist on this one of reading, and he knows the rules. Like, I haven't, Let's see.
From Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to see...
I'm hearing again no's from several members. I see the member from Regina Capel rising on a point of order, and I'm certain as a House officer he has sought unanimous consent. The honourable member.
I move that notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice.
I hear no and shaking of heads from other House officers here. Colleagues, we have a couple of votes afterwards. I know you all have business to do, but if this is the way that members would like to continue going, we will run through this. I see the honourable member from Barrie Innisfil who's riding on a point of order. I'm also hearing no agreement for points of order. The honourable member from Charleswood, Headingley, St. James, Assiniboia.
I'd like to seek you.
I also hearing no.
Oh my God, this was almost masterstroke here. Okay, so what happened first? It was the Liberal MP. I forgot her name. She was a news reporter. She's good. So she went on and basically got her speech got called because he said, "Hey, there's people screaming no's. There was no consultation," as it says in their first sentence, as the consultations. So what it looks like he's saying is, we're not going to allow these because these poos are happening at the end of question period, and it's fun, and it's all, a lot of it sounds like bluster, and so he's basically decided that you have to do the consultations. You got to do the background stuff, or else someone from the other bench can just know you out, right, before you've done, because you haven't done the background work, which is, I didn't see this coming. And he said he was going to do some changes. I like it because it's shaking it up.
My goodness, I thought this was Wednesday. Colleagues, I'm going to continue recognizing the members who are rising, but I would ask members who have not negotiated or who have not sought some arrangement that it is in your interest to do so, so that we don't waste time. The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon is rising on a point of order. I hear that there's no agreement for unanimous consent. The honourable member from Battleford Lloydminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that the House call.
I'm afraid I'm not hearing that. The honourable member from Yorkton Melville. I'm also hearing no from.
So it looks like we're going to get to see every single Conservative, at least, stand up. I hope so. I hope every single one that's there, at least. It looks like we've got a couple empty seats. Everyone gets up, so we know where they're from. Like an intro.
From the House. The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similican Nicola. I also see. The honourable member from Yorkton Melville, please, if I could ask you to take your seat. If I could ask the member to take her seat. Colleagues, ministers. Colleagues.
Ooh. And another thing I want to note, Ferguson here, he's basically, he's not reading from the paper very much. I think he's got everyone memorized. He has every MP memorized, not just their names, their party, but their riding names also. So he's he's on it. Like you can see, look, he's look at how fast he's going through them, and he's not referring to the paper very fast or very much at all. Like maybe a glance. I'm not sure. But I think he's got them memorized. So that'll make for going forward for a speedier House of Commons. When the Speaker knows everybody, there's no he can keep it rolling. If the MPs can get along with that also,
We are not being inspirational to the people who might be watching us from home. The honourable member from Okanagan, Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola had a whole bunch of no's already with the last time I raised it. I know the honourable member was speaking at the same time. The honourable member from Parry Sound. I'm hearing no. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
I have a point of order, Chair. I have a point of order. During question period, the member for Windsor-Tecumseh did shout that the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan was lying. That is unparliamentary language, and I believe if you verify with the proceedings verification officers that they will be able to confirm that the member did conduct himself in an unparliamentary way, and he should withdraw and apologize to this House. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes for rising on that point of order. I don't know if the member from Windsor-Tecumseh would like to take to his feet. If that language is unparliamentary, I will certainly take a look at it. But if the member wants to get up and preempt the work of the Speaker, it would certainly be appreciated. The honourable member from Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, if that in fact was the case, of course I do retract that statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from...
So that was a good curveball MP Barrett threw, and like you said, he boom. And this is kind of how everyone should react. It's like, oh, did I? Sorry, automatic. No, you could see he wasn't holding anything back. He was honest. This is a good point of or a good after question period.
New Westminster Burnaby is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you are reminding all members that as a sign of respect to this Parliament, you need to circulate motions for unanimous consent in advance to all members. Not a single Conservative did that for the UCs that they're presenting today.
I thank the honourable member. It is a good practice in which to do so. The honourable member from Calgary Nose Hill.
Responding to that point of order, Mr. Chair, I would remind the House that the Chair has ruled in the past that on unanimous consent motions, when it is clear that if a member is seeking unanimous consent and there is no consent at that time, there is no obligation for the House to listen to the entirety of the matter at hand. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for that supportive statement. The honourable member from Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the December be Christian Heritage Month.
I'm hearing no from the honourable member. I see the honourable member from Lakeland is rising to her feet.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House call on the government to axe the quadruple carbon tax.
I am hearing no from several members. I would like to remind the honourable member. I'd like the honourable member from Lakelands to not only please listen to the good advice from the member from Calgary Nose Hill, but please out of respect to the chair. The honourable member, St. Albert Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House noting its resolution of June 12, 20...
Hear that there is no unanimous consent for this. The honourable member from Saskatoon University.
Yes, there was another attempted arson at a church on the weekend, Mr. Speaker. And if you seek unanimous consent, you will find...
I hear that there is no unanimous consent. It being 3:20, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the amendment to the motion of Mr. Blanchet relating to the business of supply. Call in the members.
All right, the lesson of learning, the LOL was over. That was pretty interesting. It was Fergus on parade. Yeah, again, I want to note, he knew everyone's, at least, the Conservatives, without referencing that little cue card he's got, very well, and he's done a change to the poos at the end of question period. There now has to be consultations, or else it'll be quickly shouted down, and I imagine they put quite a bit of work into that little speech of, like, zingings and ringings, you know what I mean, and other... and angles in it. So, thank you for watching. Is there... Oh, I guess here, bring it in the poll. Let's see what that is. Oh, yeah, the reserves popped up a little bit in the end. What do we got here? So we got home building in Canada, number 1. I think that's what we should do. Because, 40,000 of them, they could be a good meat for the construction labor, and within 3 months, most of them can be, like, skilled labor in that home building. It would be a asset, I believe. It would drop... because they're already being paid by the government, and they don't get a really vote of what they do. So just, would be a good idea. And then, they could make it into a training exercise as much as possible, like bring the military camp to an area, I think it's a great idea. Reserves for roads, water, that was number 2, that popped up. And, of course, we know it's a major issue. There's a lot of people in the military trained in building roads, at water treatment plants and the like. And then, of course, there's also, like I said before, the meat. There's just great skilled labor of, they're good human beings ready for outstanding labor projects. It just in a very quick way, right? Quick succession. Haiti, 13%, because yes, it was requested. The U.S. Said, and he said, we don't have the people right now, so no can do. That didn't happen. And Latvia is a current mission that's going on, and I know most of you don't support who are on this channel. That and so we got the least votes. There wasn't many votes. And what do we got here? No one is lying today. No. I thought they were speaking. Uproar and outrage. Yes, that's right. Paul Trainer and Sheila. Hi, Sheila Hall and Aaron, whoever Aaron is. Coffee, British style. Yeah. Okay. Hiding scams. Okay. Thanks for watching. I don't have anything else. There's going to be some more. Tonight is going to be another live feed for probably because the ambassador of Japan will be in committee speaking about relations with China. So that should be interesting all on its own. As most people are unaware, Japan is the number 2 economy. Yeah, number 2 military. They're number 2 in a lot of things, and their quiet demeanor. You know, we all remember the 80s. Everything good, I know from me growing up, everything good was made in Japan. You know, those tapes, those, like, I could get blank tapes. They all had to be